Hey, you. Lean closer, do you hear it? The scrape of steel against scabbard. The hush of silk sliding over tatami. In ancient Japan, power was not only written in scrolls, but in blood. The silent vows of the samurai. They lived by honor, but they died by whispers. And behind their swords there were secrets. Forbidden loves, shadowed rituals, and deaths more intimate than desire itself. Tonight you will walk among them, if you dare. You step into the mists of feudal Japan. The mountains loom like black giants, their peaks veiled in clouds. Villages huddle in valleys, their lanterns glowing like scattered fireflies. And above them all, in wooden castles rising from stone foundations, the samurai guard their lords, warriors bound by oath, by steel. Fire code whispered as Bushido. The chronicles say they were more than soldiers. They were instruments of loyalty, living shields for their masters, willing to sacrifice everything, yes, even themselves. Yet beneath the iron mask of discipline lay human hearts, pulsing with forbidden desires. The forge was their cradle. A swordsmith, half priest and half magician, would hammer steel until sparks showered like stars. Each blade was folded 1,000 times, each strike of the hammer a prayer. They believed the spirit of the warrior lived in his sword. To touch another man's blade without permission was intimacy, almost an insult, as if you had touched his very soul. Historians debate how much of this was truth, how much was myth. Some say the katana was only steel, beautiful but practical. Others insist it was sacred, bound to its master's fate. A samurai without his sword was no samurai at all, a body without breath. You picture the first time a boy became samurai. His head is shaved in ritual, his robe tied with care, his master's hand resting on his shoulder. A sword is presented, not yet sharp but polished, gleaming. He bows until his forehead grazes the tatami. And in that moment, childhood is gone. His life no longer belongs to himself. One tale whispers of a youth who refused the sword. They say his father struck him down, declaring, "Better no son at all than one without honor." Whether this story is fact or fable, it reveals the truth of the age. For samurai, the sword was life, and to deny it was to deny existence itself. As you walk deeper into the mist, you feel the weight of invisible blades. Lanterns flicker along the corridor of memory, shadows shifting like armored figures, and a whisper brushes your ear. Steel is breath, blood is duty, and the blade remembers all. The forge glows, the mist thickens. The samurai's story begins. The sword was the body, but the oath was the soul. To be samurai was to bind one's life to another. A lord, a clan, a master whose will became law, whose breath became destiny. This oath was not spoken lightly. It was carved in silence, sealed with blood, whispered across generations as if it were older than the mountains themselves. They called it giri, duty, obligation, an invisible chain that bound samurai to their masters. In return, the samurai were granted land, stipends of rice, the dignity of rank. But these gifts were illusions. What truly mattered was obedience. A samurai's life was no longer his own. To serve was to exist. To hesitate was betrayal. Historians still argue whether loyalty was chosen or imposed. Some say samurai were willing servants, finding pride in devotion. Others point to the cruelty of the system, men bound like shadows to lords who might cast them aside without thought. Truth lies somewhere in the blur between reverence and fear. You picture the ritual of swearing fealty. A young warrior kneels on tatami, the smell of incense curling upward. His lord sits before him, robes heavy, eyes sharp. A small cup of sake is poured, lifted, and shared. No words of freedom remain after the first sip. The samurai's forehead touches the mat. The Lord's hand falls upon his shoulder like a seal. The oath is complete, and yet loyalty was not pure. Whispers of forbidden bonds drift through the archives. Some samurai loved their lords with a devotion deeper than duty, a passion that blurred honor with desire. In the hidden language of poems, they confessed feelings they could never name aloud. Was it loyalty or love? Historians still quarrel, but the verses remain. Your sword is my breath, your shadow my shelter. Without you I vanish. One tale tells of a retainer who followed his master into exile. They say he chose hunger and cold rather than abandon the oath. When the Lord finally died, the samurai performed seppuku at his grave, his blood soaking the earth like a vow carried into eternity. Was it loyalty or longing? Perhaps both. You stand in a quiet hall, the tatami soft beneath your feet. A low brazier glows, the air thick with the scent of sake and ash. Shadows kneel in rows, their heads bowed, their oaths unspoken but unbreakable. And in the silence a whisper curls toward you, steady and absolute. My life is not mine. It is his. And when he falls, I fall with him. The brazier flickers. The hall darkens, and the oath binds forever. To live as samurai was to carry the sword. To die as samurai was to carry it inward. The blade was not only a weapon against enemies, it was the final judge, the last escape, the sacred seal of honor. They called it seppuku, the ritual of self-destruction, where life was surrendered not to another's hand but to one's own. The chronicles describe it with reverence. A mat laid upon the ground, white cloth spread across it. Witnesses gathered in silence, the air heavy with incense. The condemned samurai dressed in his finest robes, sometimes pure white, sometimes adorned with the crest of his clan. He bowed to his lord, bowed to the witnesses, bowed to heaven itself. Then he sat, legs folded beneath him, the blade gleaming before him like a mirror of fate. The short sword, wakizashi, was placed upon the mat. Some accounts say it was wiped clean until it shone like water. Others insist it was wrapped in silk to soften its cruelty. At the final moment, the samurai grasped it firmly, pressed it to his abdomen, and drew the steel across. Pain was not the purpose. Honor was. To show courage, to prove loyalty, to control even the manner of death. This was the essence of the ritual. Yet he was not alone. Beside him knelt another, the Kaishakunin II. Sword drawn, eyes steady, he stood ready to deliver mercy. When the samurai fell forward, or when his strength faltered, the Kaishakunin struck, severing the head in a single stroke. Death was swift, yet dignity preserved. The body fell, the blood spilled, and honor was restored. Historians still debate the meaning. Was seppuku truly noble, or was it a cruel invention of a society obsessed with appearances? Was it devotion to ideals or coercion disguised as honor? The truth is blurred by centuries of blood and silence. You imagine one such night. Lanterns glow faintly in a courtyard. Snow drifts across black tiles. A samurai kneels, robes trembling in the cold. His lord watches from the shadows, expression unreadable. The blade flashes, steel meeting flesh. The crowd does not gasp, does not cry. Only the wind sighs. And when the Kaishakunin's sword falls, silence becomes eternal. One tale whispers of a retainer who begged to die after his master was executed. His plea was granted. They say he performed seppuku with such calm that the witnesses wept, unable to reconcile such serenity with such horror. Another story tells of a young samurai who faltered midway, his hand trembling. His Kaishakunin, overcome with pity, struck too soon, an act of mercy or of weakness. The scrolls do not agree. You stand before a courtyard, its stones dark with memory. The wind rustles, carrying the scent of smoke and pine. And in the hush a whisper drifts like falling snow. To die by the blade is to live forever in honor. The body ends. The vow remains, the lanterns fade. The steel cools, and the ritual lingers. Honor bound the samurai's body, but the heart was less obedient. In a world ruled by steel and silence, love was both dangerous and intoxicating. Whispers of passion crept into the tatami halls, weaving themselves into poems, letters, and secret meetings beneath lantern light. These were the loves the code did not allow, yet they burned all the brighter for their secrecy. The geisha were the most whispered of companions. To the outside world they were artists, dancers, musicians, poets of the floating world. Yet to samurai they were mirrors of longing, women who listened when honor forbade speech, who offered laughter in nights otherwise weighed with blood. Historians debate the depth of these bonds. Some say geisha were only courtesans, distractions before battle. Others insist that for samurai, who lived with death as constant shadow, the geisha were salvation, the one place where they could shed their armor and become human again. You imagine the scene, a dim room, shoji screens glowing with candlelight. A samurai sits rigid, his sword at his side, his eyes weary from war. Across from him, a geisha lifts her shamisen, plucking notes that fall like water upon stone. Their gazes meet. Nothing is spoken. Everything is understood. But geisha were not the only forbidden love. In some chronicles, whispers of male companionship surface, bonds between samurai and their retainers, forged not only in duty, but in intimacy. In the quiet of barracks on the eve of battle, oaths of loyalty deepened into something unspoken, something history only hints at. Was it camaraderie or desire? Historians still argue. Yet the poems remain filled with longing disguised as devotion. Steel binds us by day, but at night your breath keeps me. When dawn comes, I vanish. One tale tells of a samurai who fell for his lord's concubine. Discovered, he was forced to choose between execution and seppuku. He chose the blade, leaving behind a letter written in trembling strokes. I loved as I fought completely, without regret. Another story whispers of two warriors whose bond was so strong that when one fell in battle, the other charged into certain death, choosing to join him rather than live dishonored by survival. You stand now beneath a cherry tree, its blossoms pale as moonlight. Petals drift to the ground, soft as whispers. Here lovers once met, knowing each kiss might be their last. And in the hush of falling petals a voice lingers. We loved in silence. We loved in shadow. And though history denies us, the blossoms remember. The petals scatter. The lantern fades. The forbidden remains. Steel was not only a servant of war, but of pride. When words failed and insults burned too deeply, samurai turned to the ritual of the duel, a meeting of blades where honor and hatred collided in silence. To refuse was cowardice. To lose was death. To win was to carve one's name into the air with blood. The chronicles describe these contests with reverence. At dawn, beneath cherry blossoms, or on a riverbank shrouded in mist, two men would face one another. No shields, no armor, only the swords that mirrored their souls. Their attendants stood back, silent witnesses. The duel was not spectacle. It was sacrifice. Historians debate the rules. Some accounts say duels were bound by ritual. A bow, an exchange of poems, the drawing of blades in perfect unison. Others insist they were sudden, violent, born of fury and ending in chaos. Perhaps both are true, the mask of ceremony covering the raw truth of survival. You imagine one such morning. The ground is wet with dew. A samurai in white robes bows deeply, his breath clouding in the chill air. Across from him, his rival mirrors the gesture, their eyes locked, their souls already crossing swords before steel has moved. The silence is unbearable. Then a flash, a cry, the air shuddering with steel meeting steel. In less than a breath, one body falls, crimson blooming across pale cloth. The other sheathes his sword in silence, face unreadable. One tale whispers of a samurai who, on the eve of his duel, composed a death poem so beautiful that even his rival wept before striking him down. Another tells of Miyamoto Musashi, the wandering swordsman who fought with wooden weapons against armed opponents, defeating them through cunning as much as strength. Was he legend or truth sharpened by memory? Historians still quarrel, but his name endures like a scar across time. Dueling was more than vengeance. It was mask and mirror, a way to display mastery, to affirm identity. To strike cleanly was to prove not only skill but discipline. To hesitate was to shame one's ancestors. Each duel was a performance, the stage set by silence, the script written in blood. You stand in an empty courtyard, the stones cold beneath your feet. Shadows gather at its edges, two figures facing one another, blades glinting in the moonlight. They bow, the air holds its breath, and in that stillness a whisper rises. We fought not for life, but for the echo of our names. The silence breaks, the blades vanish, and the duel remains. The samurai did not see the sword as weapon alone. It was a philosophy, a mirror polished by discipline until it reflected not just the warrior's hand, but his soul. They called it kenjutsu, the art of the sword, but beneath the strikes and stances lived something deeper, the path of Bushido, the way of the warrior. Training began before dawn. In wooden halls, the air cold and sharp with the scent of pine, young samurai rose to face their masters. Blades of oak and bokken struck against each other, the sound like drums of thunder. Each movement was repetition, each repetition a prayer, the body memorizing the flow of death until it became as natural as breath. Historians still argue whether the martial discipline of samurai was more practical than spiritual. Some see their training as mere preparation for battle, efficient and ruthless. Others describe it as meditation in motion, where the warrior sought not to defeat his enemy, but to perfect himself through the dance of steel. The stance was everything. Feet rooted like trees, shoulders soft as drifting clouds, eyes fixed yet unblinking. A samurai was taught to draw his sword in a single motion, yaijutsu, cutting even as the blade left the scabbard. Victory often depended on that first heartbeat, the difference between silence and death. You picture a master instructing his pupil. "Do not fight the enemy," he whispers. "Fight his shadow. Strike before he knows he is already defeated." The boy bows, sweat dripping onto tatami. His hands raw from practice. Outside, cherry blossoms drift through open screens, their petals falling like reminders that beauty and death are inseparable. One tale tells of a wandering swordsman who could sever a falling leaf mid-air without tearing its veins. Another whispers of a samurai who trained so long in silence that when he finally drew his blade, he could cut through armor as though it were silk. Were these truths or stories sharpened into myth? Historians cannot decide, but the legends remain, carried like echoes along the path of the sword. Bushido demanded more than skill. It demanded purity. To master the sword was to master the self, to still the trembling of the hand, the fear in the chest, the chaos of the mind. A warrior who drew in anger was already defeated. A warrior who struck in calm was unbreakable. You stand now in a shadowed dojo. Wooden swords rest upon racks, their surfaces worn smooth by countless hands. In the dim light you hear faint footsteps, the echo of practice that has never truly ended. And in the silence a whisper curls, "Steel is only steel." The true blade is the will that guides it. The tatami sighs. The shadows bow, and the way of the sword endures. Honor was the shield of the samurai, but betrayal was the crack that split it. For all their oaths and rituals, the history of Japan remembers as many stories of treachery as of loyalty. Moments when ambition outweighed devotion, when steel turned not against enemies but against masters, brothers, even kin. The chronicles speak often of Akechi Mitsuhide, the general who turned upon his lord, Oda Nobunaga. In 1582, Nobunaga rested within the temple of Honnoji, surrounded by only a small guard. Mitsuhide, once trusted, struck without warning. His forces stormed the temple, torches blazing, steel flashing. Nobunaga, cornered, chose death by his own hand rather than surrender. The betrayal shook Japan, leaving Nobunaga's dream of unification in ashes. Historians still argue, was Mitsuhide a traitor driven by jealousy, or a patriot seeking to free the land from tyranny? The scrolls blur fact and motive, but the betrayal remains carved in fire. Smaller stories linger in whispers. A retainer who took bribes to open castle gates at midnight, dooming his clan. A brother who turned sword upon brother, his blade justified as loyalty to a different lord. A samurai who betrayed not for power, but for love, giving secrets to a rival in exchange for a geisha's hand. History rarely recorded their names, but the shadows of their acts stain the chronicles. You imagine one such night. A castle sleeps, lanterns dim, the moat reflecting stars. Within, a guard shifts uneasily, his hand brushing the purse heavy with silver hidden in his robe. The gate creaks, the silence fractures. Moments later, screams echo across the walls. Honor dies in the time it takes for silver to clink, yet betrayal was not always treachery. Sometimes it was survival. The shifting tides of daimyo and shogun forced samurai to choose between duty and pragmatism. To cling to loyalty could mean annihilation. To betray could mean life, land, legacy. Was it dishonor or simply the cruel truth of war? Historians still quarrel. The cost of betrayal was often blood. Those discovered faced seppuku, their names erased from scrolls, their families shamed for generations. But punishment could not erase the wound. For each act of treachery, 1,000 loyal oaths were stained. You stand within the ruins of Honnoji, where Nobunaga's ashes once mingled with the earth. The temple is rebuilt, yet the air feels heavy, haunted. A whisper rises from the stones, sharp as the edge of a blade. Loyalty is a mask. Beneath it, all men bleed the same. The lantern flickers, the temple sighs, and betrayal lingers like smoke. The samurai were men of flesh, but their shadows often outlived their bodies. Japan's nights are thick with tales of warriors who refused to rest, of swordsmen who rose again as whispers, as phantoms, as stains upon the moonlit earth. For every noble death sung in poems, there was another retold in hushed voices. A death so violent, so unjust, that the spirit could not be bound. They called them onryo, vengeful ghosts. Unlike the serene ancestors honored at shrines, these spirits returned clad in rage, their armor soaked not in blood, but in resentment. Villages claim to see them at crossroads, where battle once raged. Their silhouettes glimmered like steel in the fog. One tale speaks of Taira no Tomomori, who tied an anchor to his waist and plunged into the sea after defeat at Dan no Ura. They say his spirit still rises with the waves, his eyes burning like lanterns beneath the water, dragging sailors to the deep. Another whispers of Ronin executed unjustly, who returned each night to rattle the gates of the magistrate who condemned them, until the man himself collapsed from terror. Historians call these myths echoes of trauma woven into folklore. Yet the stories endure, because they explain what history cannot. How loyalty twisted into betrayal, how death came too soon, how honor curdled into rage. You picture a battlefield after the clash. Bodies lie scattered, armor broken, banners torn. The wind moves slowly, carrying the smell of blood and smoke. Then a shape stirs. A samurai, face pale, rises, though no breath fills his chest. His sword drags across the ground, sparks flickering, though no fire is struck. His eyes search not for peace, but for vengeance. The living flee, whispering his name in fear. In Edo's back streets, they whispered of samurai ghosts haunting tea houses, seeking the geisha they loved in life. Lanterns swayed without wind. Shamisen strings plucked themselves. Cups of sake spilled as if knocked over by unseen hands. Some geisha left offerings of incense and silk, praying to soothe the restless lovers who would not let go. One tale, darker still, tells of a kaishakunin who failed to deliver a clean stroke in Seppuku. His comrade's spirit returned each night, blade in hand, demanding he finish what he had begun. The man grew pale, sleepless, until finally he performed seppuku himself, ending the haunting. You walk now through a temple graveyard. Moss covers the stones. Lanterns flicker faintly. The air feels heavy, as though unseen eyes linger. And from the mist between the graves a whisper rises low and hollow. Honor binds the living. Vengeance binds the dead. The mist thickens. The lantern sputters, and the ghosts of the samurai wait in silence. The chronicles often speak of samurai as men, but Japan's past carries quieter stories, of women who took up the blade, who fought and died with the same ferocity as their brothers. They were called Onabu geisha, warrior women of the samurai class, and their lives were as forbidden as they were extraordinary. From the Heian to the Sengoku era, these women stood not in shadows but in armor. Their weapon was often the naginata, a polearm with a curved blade, elegant, sweeping, deadly. It was said to give a woman reach against mounted warriors, to balance grace with power. In painted scrolls, they are shown with long hair streaming, robes bound at the waist, eyes calm even as the battlefield swirled with chaos. Historians debate their role. Some argue they were rare exceptions, remembered only because they defied the norm. Others insist they were essential in times of war, defending castles when men marched to distant fields, guarding clans with loyalty equal to any samurai. One name rises above the rest: Tomoe Gozen, the legendary female warrior of the Genpei War. The tales describe her as beautiful yet fierce, a rider unmatched, a swordswoman who could hold her own against 10 men. At the Battle of Awazu in 1184, she fought until the last, cutting down enemies even as her allies fell around her. Some say she was captured, others that she vanished into exile, her fate blurred by myth. But her name endures, etched like steel across the centuries. Another story tells of Nakano Takeko, who led a unit of women during the Boshin War in 1868. With naginata in hand, She charged into battle against modern rifles, fighting for a shogun already doomed. When mortally wounded, she asked her sister to cut off her head, so her body would not be taken by the enemy. Her grave is still honored today, her courage remembered as both loyalty and defiance. You imagine one of these women in her chamber, brushing her hair before dawn. Outside, drums beat, signaling war. She sets aside the comb, lifts her naginata and ties her robe with steady hands. In the lacquered mirror, her eyes are calm, her face lit not by fear but by duty. To step onto the battlefield is forbidden, yet to remain behind is impossible. The presence of honorable geisha unsettled the order of their world. In a society that prized male dominance, they were both admired and feared. Poems celebrated them as blossoms of steel. Whispers condemned them as unnatural, dangerous, unfeminine. Yet their existence proves a truth that history often tried to silence. That loyalty and courage knew no gender. You stand before a shrine, its wooden torii gate weathered with centuries. Offerings of flowers and naginata charms hang from ropes, left by those who remember the women of the sword. The wind shifts, carrying a faint whisper, sharp yet tender. We were not shadows. We were storms, and though they buried our names, our blades still sing. The shrine creaks, the blossoms stir. And the women of the sword endure. To be samurai was to serve. But what became of a warrior when his master fell? When the oath that bound his soul was severed by betrayal, defeat, or death? Then he became Ronin, a samurai without a lord, drifting like a ghost through the alleys of Edo, feared, pitied, and despised in equal measure. The chronicles describe them as outcasts. Without stipends, they begged or sold their swords to the highest bidder. Some became mercenaries, bodyguards for merchants, even hired killers. Others sank into poverty, gambling and drinking their days away in the shadowed inns of the floating world. Children mocked them. Samurai scorned them. They were wolves without a pack, dangerous and desperate. Historians debate their place in society. Were they symbols of dishonor, proof that loyalty could end in ruin? Or were they tragic figures, caught in a system that valued service above humanity? Some even became legends, their disgrace transformed into tales of perseverance and vengeance. The most famous of these stories is that of the 47 Ronin. In 1701, their lord, Asano Naganori, was forced to commit seppuku after striking a corrupt court official. His retainers became masterless overnight. For 2 years they lived as beggars and tradesmen, hiding their intent. Then in the depth of winter they struck, storming the mansion of their enemy. They killed him and placed his severed head upon their lord's grave. Their revenge complete, they surrendered themselves. The shogun ordered them to commit seppuku. They obeyed without protest, each plunging the blade into his own belly, dying with the calm of men whose honor had been restored. To this day their graves are visited by pilgrims who bow in silence, unsure if they honor loyalty or lament its price. You imagine Edo on a winter night. Snow falls like ash, covering rooftops and lanterns. 47 men move silently through the streets, blades hidden, eyes fixed. They break into the mansion, their cries shattering the stillness. Steel flashes, screams echo, then silence returns. When the dawn rises, the deed is done, the vengeance sealed. And already death waits for them with patient hands. Other Ronin found no such redemption. Some roamed the countryside, selling their skill for rice. Others vanished into banditry. Their swords turned against the people they once swore to protect. In every case, their existence was a wound in the samurai ideal, proof that honor could be broken, that loyalty could end in ash. You walk now through a graveyard in Edo, where the stones of the 47 Ronin stand in rows, offerings of incense and sake resting at their feet. The snow crunches softly beneath you, the air cold and clean, and from the stillness a whisper rises low as frost. We had no master, but we had each other. In silence we waited. In silence we struck. In silence we died. The snow drifts. The graves endure, and the Ronin remain. The castles of Japan rose like mountains of stone and wood, their white walls gleaming in sunlight, their black roofs curling like the wings of crows. To outsiders they were fortresses, symbols of power, guardians of lords, but inside those towering gates shadows gathered. Behind painted screens and lacquered doors, whispers of ambition, betrayal, and forbidden desire echoed as loudly as the clash of swords. These castles were not merely strongholds. They were worlds within walls, corridors twisted like mazes, designed so intruders would lose their way. Secret passages led from chambers to gardens, from tea rooms to hidden towers. Servants scurried like ghosts. Eunuchs in silence, concubines in silk, warriors in armor. Every stone carried weight, not just of defense, but of intrigue. Historians debate whether life inside the castles was truly as elegant as scrolls depict. Some paint them as palaces of beauty, where art and poetry flourished. Others insist they were prisons, where lords and retainers alike were bound by suspicion. Every banquet a stage, every cup of sake a possible trap. One tale lingers at Meiji Castle, the White Heron. They say a maid named Okiku discovered a plot of treason. To silence her, the conspirators accused her of stealing a precious plate. Her lord condemned her and she was thrown into a well. From that night her spirit rose, counting plates in the dark. 1, 2, 3. Her voice echoed through the stone, until madness gripped all who heard it. Even now they say, if you stand by Okiku's well at dusk, you can hear her counting, her sorrow woven into the castle walls. Another story whispers from Matsumoto Castle, where rumors spoke of concubines kept hidden, their beauty both luxury and liability. Some say their presence ignited jealous rivalries that led to poisonings, duels, and even assassinations. Historians cannot confirm the details, yet the gossip endures embroidered into the legend of the place. You imagine one such night within a great castle. Lanterns glow along the halls, their light trembling on painted screens. In the banquet chamber, a lord reclines, his cup lifted. His retainers kneel, masks of loyalty on their faces, though behind their eyes flickers something sharper: hunger, resentment, ambition. In the women's quarters, silk rustles as concubines whisper of who will be summoned, who will be forgotten. Beneath it all, the stone foundations groan, as if they too bear witness to the secrets above. One tale, half legend, half truth, tells of a lord who built hidden chambers within his castle, where he met his forbidden lover, the wife of a retainer. When the affair was uncovered, blood ran across the tatami. Some say her ghost still lingers, her breath felt in the cold drafts that slip between sliding doors. You stand now within the ruins of a castle, its walls weathered, its stones warm beneath the sun. Tourists climb its towers, yet at twilight, when the crowds leave, the shadows reclaim it. The air grows heavy, the silence deep, and from the walls a whisper seeps, low and unyielding. Stone remembers more than swords. Within these walls, honor and betrayal shared the same bed. The gates creak, the lantern dims, and the castles keep their shadows. In the world of the samurai, the sword was not the only ritual. There was another quieter art, one that balanced steel with silence, the tea ceremony. To outsiders it seemed delicate. Porcelain cups, tatami mats, the fragrance of powdered leaves whisked into froth. But to those who lived within its shadows, the tea room could be as dangerous as the battlefield. The tea ceremony, or chanoyu, was crafted not only as hospitality, but as theatre. Every gesture was deliberate. The folding of the silk cloth, the pouring of hot water, the bowing of heads. To kneel across from another, to sip from the same bowl, was to share a fragile truce. Yet beneath the surface of calm, blades often waited. Historians debate the role of tea in samurai culture. Some describe it as a meditative art, a pursuit of harmony and balance. Others see it as a political weapon, a place where alliances were forged, plots whispered, and enemies measured across steaming cups. You imagine one such gathering. A lord invites his retainers into the tea house. They enter barefoot, swords left outside, and a symbol of humility, yet also of vulnerability. The host kneels, his movements flawless, his voice calm. Cups are passed. Steam curls upward. Yet each man knows that poison could dissolve as easily as tea, that every sip might be his last. The silence between words is heavy, a silence sharper than steel. One tale speaks of Sen no Rikyu, the great tea master who served Oda Nobunaga and later Toyotomi Hideyoshi. His ceremonies embodied wabi-sabi, beauty in simplicity, perfection in imperfection. But whispers say his influence grew too powerful, his presence too commanding. Hideyoshi ordered him to commit seppuku. On his final day, Rikyu held a tea ceremony, served his guests with flawless grace, and then calmly took his own life. Was it devotion or defiance? Historians still argue. Another story tells of a retainer who used the tea room to confront his rival. They sat in stillness, sipping in silence. When the last drop was gone, the host rose, bowed, and struck, his short sword hidden beneath the tatami. The rival fell, his blood staining the woven mats. The tea bowls remained upright, as if mocking the broken harmony. The tea room was paradox, a space of serenity where the heart was meant to be still, yet also a stage where death could be delivered with elegance. To sip was to trust, to bow was to risk. To leave alive was a gift, not a guarantee. You stand now in a small tea house, its paper walls glowing in the fading light. A kettle simmers softly, its hiss like a whisper from the past. You kneel, you bow, you lift the cup to your lips. The taste is bitter, grounding. And from the stillness a whisper stirs. In tea there is peace. In tea there is death. Both are the same cup. The steam fades. The mats grow cold. And the ceremony lingers. For the samurai, loyalty was sworn to lord and clan, but blood carried its own chains. Families were both shield and snare, binding generations in webs of duty. A father's honor shaped the son's destiny. A brother's betrayal could stain the entire line. In the scrolls of history, samurai bloodlines are written not only in ink, but in wounds. The chronicles remember Minamoto no Yoshitsune, the brilliant general of the Genpei War. Victorious in battle, adored by the people, he should have been a hero eternal. Yet his own brother Minamoto no Yoritomo saw only a rival. Envy curdled into suspicion, suspicion into death. Yoshitsune was hunted, driven into exile until finally betrayed by those he trusted. Surrounded, he performed seppuku. Legends say his spirit wandered, refusing to forgive the blood that turned against him. Historians still quarrel. Was Yoritomo protecting his new shogunate, or was it fratricide driven by jealousy? Either way, the story endures as proof that the sharpest blades are sometimes wielded by kin. Another tale whispers of a father who tested his sons with a bundle of arrows. One by one, each boy snapped a single shaft with ease. but when bound together, the bundle held firm. "So must you be," he told them. Yet when he died, they quarreled for land and power, their unity forgotten. The bundle of arrows shattered, and with it their clan. You imagine a dim hall, firelight flickering across painted screens. A father kneels before his son, offering a blade. "Guard it," he says, "as you would guard my name." The boy bows, tears hot in his eyes. Years later, that same blade will be drawn, perhaps in defense of the name, perhaps against it. Women too bore the weight of blood. Daughters were married off to cement alliances, their bodies used as bridges between rival clans. Some endured in silence. Others chose defiance. A story is told of a samurai wife who, discovering her husband's plan to betray his lord, wrote the secret upon a scroll and delivered it herself. Her husband was executed, her name erased. Her loyalty, though unquestionable, became a curse. The burden of lineage was unrelenting. To be born samurai was to inherit not freedom, but expectation. To fight, to serve, to avenge, to endure. Blood was both inheritance and prison, honor and doom. You stand now in the ruins of a clan estate, its stone walls cracked, its gardens overgrown. The wind stirs fallen banners, their crests faded but still visible. A whisper curls through the empty halls. Blood binds tighter than steel, but blood also spills faster. The banners fall, the silence deepens, and the betrayals of bloodlines linger. Every dynasty casts a long shadow, and for the samurai that shadow reached its end in the 19th century. The world around them shifted. Muskets thundered louder than swords, railroads carved across mountains, and foreign ships with black smoke and iron hulls anchored in Edo Bay. The age of the warrior, once eternal, began to fade. The Meiji Restoration of 1868 was the breaking point. The shogunate crumbled, the emperor reclaimed power, and with him came reformers determined to drag Japan into modernity. The samurai, once pillars of the nation, were declared relics. Their stipends of rice were abolished. Their right to bear swords in public was stripped away. Armor that once gleamed in battle was left to gather dust in storerooms. Historians debate whether this was progress or betrayal. Some call it liberation, an end to a caste system that had chained Japan for centuries. Others mourn it as a death, a severing of spirit from the nation's body. To the samurai themselves, it was humiliation. The silence did not last. Across Japan, warriors rose in rebellion, clinging to honor even as the world left them behind. The most famous was the Satsuma Rebellion of 1877, led by Saigo Takamori, once a loyal general, now a symbol of resistance. His army of samurai faced the emperor's modern troops, rifles and cannons against blades and banners. For months they fought, but steel could not stand against gunpowder. At Shiroyama, Saigo fell, his death marking the twilight of the samurai. Some say he died by bullet. Others whisper he chose seppuku, ending his life as his ancestors had, his blood sealing the honor of his cause. The truth remains blurred, but his name became legend. The last true samurai, you imagine the battlefield at dawn. Samurai in worn armor charge uphill, their banners fluttering against the smoke of rifles. They cry their lord's name, their voices fierce though their weapons are obsolete. Gunfire cracks, bodies fall, yet they rise again, blades flashing until the last breath leaves them. In that moment, tradition collides with modernity, and tradition breaks. In the years that followed, the samurai spirit dissolved into memory. Some became politicians, scholars, industrialists, adapting to the new world. Others drifted into obscurity, their swords sold, their crests forgotten. The way of the warrior lived on in poems, in rituals, in whispers, but not in the streets. You stand at the base of Shiroyama Hill, the grass growing thick where men once bled. The city hums around it, cars, lights, the noise of modern Japan. Yet the hill remembers. A whisper drifts through the wind, soft, mournful, unyielding. We lived by the blade. We died by the gun. But the spirit does not vanish. The city brightens, the hill darkens, and the twilight of the samurai endures. The battles are over now. The clang of steel has faded. The banners are folded, and the castles lie quiet beneath the moon. The samurai, once guardians of lords and keepers of oaths, have stepped into history's silence. Yet their presence lingers, in the curve of a blade behind glass, in the poems written before death, in the whispers that stir through Japan's misted hills. You walk a lonely path, lined with cherry trees. Their blossoms fall softly, petals scattering across the earth like fragments of forgotten vows. A faint breeze carries the scent of incense, of tea, of steel long cooled. Each step feels lighter, as though the ghosts of warriors walk beside you, not in armor but in memory. The world has changed. Guns thunder where swords once sang, and cities glow where castles once ruled. Yet the spirit of the samurai is not gone. It rests in silence, in discipline, in the quiet strength of those who endure. The path narrows, the lanterns dim, the blossoms drift slower now, falling like snow. Your breath steadies, your eyes grow heavy. In the hush of the night, a whisper lingers, soft as silk. Honor fades, steel rusts, but peace endures. The petals settle, the shadows bow, and the samurai sleep.